Welcome back to Baking with Love. I'm Carolyn Stellatella, aka Stella, and today I'd like to share with you my recipe for Caramel Stella-Litas. Why did I spell it? Because I don't know how you say it. And depending on where you're from may be the answer. This is a little map. There's actually been studies done about how people say caramel or caramel. And the red area, this gives a whole new meaning to red and blue states. The red areas in the west and the northern part of our great country tend to pronounce it with 2 syllables, caramel. And the blue areas, the south and the northeast, like Vermont, tend to use the 3-syllable pronunciation, according to this study, caramel. So I'll probably say it both ways today, which is the lightly shaded areas, and that way I can make everybody happy. So the original recipe was called oatmeal caramelitas, but I stellaed it up a little bit, and I'll tell you what I mean by that as we go. So let's get to our recipe. First, we're going to preheat our oven to 350 degrees, and I'm going to multitask a little bit because later in the recipe, it calls for our filling a generous half cup of chopped nuts. So I'm going to use walnuts, and the nuts should be toasted. So while my oven's preheating, I'm going to toast these walnuts. You can use pecans if you want, or some other nut, but toasting brings out the nutty flavor and also just makes them a little crisper. So you can toast nuts on your stovetop in a dry skillet if you'd like, but you can also do it this way in the oven, and you just have to watch. In the oven makes it a little more even, but you also have to make sure you don't overdo it and scorch them. So we'll put them in, set our oven to 350, and toast our nuts. Then our prepared pan. Last time we used an 8x8 with 2 pieces of parchment. This time I'm using a 9x13 inch with just 1 piece of parchment and a little non-stick cooking spray, and that'll be fine. And now for our crust ingredients. So we're going to use 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 cups, it's a little stuck, 2 cups of quick cooking oats. You can use old-fashioned rolled oats if you want, a little bumpier texture, but do not use steel-cut oats. That would not be good. Then you can use 1½ cups firmly packed dark brown sugar. Now, did you ever wonder why recipes call for firmly packing your brown sugar? Well, what is brown sugar? It's white granulated sugar that they add a little molasses to. So dark brown sugar has a little more molasses for a little more robust taste, and light brown sugar has a little bit less molasses. And in the process of adding the molasses, it actually adds a little moisture and a little air. So if you don't pack your brown sugar, you might not have the right amount for your recipe. So I'll show you. Here is what looks like a cup of dark brown sugar. But if you firmly pack it, and you can use your fingers or the back of a spoon, you'll see how much it goes down. So if you don't firmly pack it, you'll be gypping yourself and your recipe a little bit. So you can add a little bit more and pack it again. You just want it to be level with the top of your cup. And if you have any hard lumps, you can kind of break them up as well. And just keep packing until you get a nice level cup. So that's 1 cup of dark brown sugar. And this recipe calls for 1½ cups firmly packed dark brown sugar. So again, I'll scoop out what looks like the ½ cup, do my firmly packing with my fingers, and add a pinch more and level it off. And that is my 1½ cups. And then I will use my fork to just kind of break them up a little bit and give it a stir before we add our other dry ingredients, which include 1 teaspoon of baking soda, a ½ teaspoon of salt, and a generous ½ teaspoon of cinnamon. This is one of my additions to the original recipe, and cinnamon's such a nice flavor, especially this time of year. Fall just started, and it's a warming spice, so I'm going to add that generous ½ teaspoon of cinnamon, that little pinch. And I think I smell the nuts, so let me check. They are toasted to perfection. They're a little shade darker. The oil comes up a little bit. It's hot, so I'm going to let that cool there. And now we've got our dry ingredients, our flour, quick oats, firmly packed brown sugar, baking soda, salt, and cinnamon. We need some glue. So here we have 2½ sticks of unsalted butter at room temperature. That is 1¼ cups, and room temperature is an important part of this recipe. If you've ever tried to take butter right out of the fridge and mix it into your recipe, you probably know it's not going to work really well. For some recipes like pie crust, you want a cold butter because that'll make your pie crust flaky. But for this, we need room temp. And if you've ever tried to speed that up a little bit in the microwave, you probably also know that it's pretty risky because they heat unevenly. You'll get one butter with a pool in the middle. You'll get another butter that's a total puddle. So room temperature, you have to think ahead for your recipe. So we're going to add these 2½ nice room temp, you can see they're even a little bendy, sticks into our dry ingredients. And then we're going to give it a mix. And today I'm going to splurge and use my electric hand mixer. Last time we used the fork method, and this will be a little quicker and probably a little more even. So you can see that butter's nice and soft. You don't want melted butter for this. It will make your crust too oily and not the right consistency. You want a nice crumble, and the room temperature butter is really a key. So give it a nice, make sure everything's incorporated, that the butter kind of gets into little crumbs, and you can do it at medium or low. Just kind of turn your bowl. If you use a stand mixer, it'll turn around for you, but I like my hand mixer. And you can also just pause for a moment, get your spatula and give it a swirl. Make sure that's not on the cord. And get the bottom stuff mixed in so you can see there's still a little bit of flour that's not incorporated. So give it a turn, and then I'm going to hit it with the mixer again. You can scrape down the sides if need be. All right, give it another whirl. And if you see any hard pieces, sometimes the brown sugar, the molasses hardens. You could just pick those right out so that nobody bites into a hard piece. That looks good. And I don't see any dark pieces of molasses from the brown sugar. So there's our nice crumb mixture. And before we put it into our prepared pan, we're going to reserve 3 cups for later. So this is a nice part of this recipe too, that the crust is also the topping. So again, you don't have a lot of bowls that you have to mess with. So that's about 2 cups. We'll set that aside till we get to our topping. And our 3rd cup for later. We'll get rid of our brown sugar. And then the remainder is going into our 9 by 13 inch prepared pan. And you're just going to evenly distribute it and give it a little press. So again, I'll use my fingers for this. You want about a 1/2 inch thickness because it's going to hold up some really nice filling. And you want it even and in the corners. So you can just spread it out. Again, you have your parchment lining your pan long ways. And again, if there's any powdery stuff, you kind of just blend that in. The butter's going to melt while it's baking, and that's going to be just fine. And if you feel like you need a little more, you can always pinch some out of the topping, and there'll be plenty for both. So it's about 6 cups altogether. Like I said, nice even layer. Make sure that the corners are sturdy because they want to hold up all that goo when we start adding our caramel, and that looks good. Give my hands a wipe and stick this into our 350-degree oven. And while this is baking, we're going to work on our filling a little bit. It's going to bake about 10 minutes. So at the 5-minute mark, I'd probably, under normal circumstances, give it a little spin, check it. You want it to have golden edges and be somewhat set, but not cooked all the way because it's going to go back in the oven. So for our filling, the recipe calls for about a 12-ounce jar of caramel ice cream topping, which you can usually find near your freezer section. But if you get lucky, like I did, and you find a 16-ounce jar, go for it. The recipe for the 12-ounce jar recommends 3 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, but with the 16-ounce jar, you just use 4 tablespoons. So we'll measure that. And the flour is going to kind of thicken it a little bit, make it a little less gooey, make it just the right consistency for our filling so it doesn't get too runny. So we've got our 16-ounce jar. Again, you can use the smaller one if you'd like. And we've got our 4 tablespoons of all-purpose flour, and I am just going to use my fork for this. And you're going to give it a whirl and have it all blend in. So it'll just make your caramel a little stiffer and a little bit lighter in color, which you won't see because it's going to be in the middle of all the other good stuff. So give that a good mix. And you'll know when it's done, it'll kind of be uniform. It just won't be as clear a color as it was when it came out of the jar. And again, that's while your bottom crust is just baking to the right consistency, the right doneness. And again, you should check it about halfway. Your oven might be a little hotter or a little cooler, so it might need a few more minutes. All right, so that looks good. So for the magic of TV, our crust is done. Oh, this time it is hot, so I'm going to use my mitt. Perfect. We're going to just place this over here on the cooling rack while we get ready for our filling. So as I mentioned, I changed the name of this recipe because I changed the recipe a little bit. And the original recipe called for 1 cup of chocolate morsels. And instead, I have used in the past 1/3 cup of butterscotch morsels, 1/3 cup of dark chocolate morsels, and if you can find them, 1/3 cup of cinnamon morsels. We were talking about cinnamon flavor earlier. So this is 1/3 cup of each. If you want to go with 100% chocolate, you can use semi-sweet, dark, bittersweet milk if that's your thing. But I'm going to use the mix. And you're just going to spread these out. And if you can't find cinnamon chips, you can use 50% chocolate, 50% butterscotch. You can use your imagination. You're just going to spread these out evenly over the hot crust. And again, I just like to mix it up, make sure you have a little bit of every flavor in all areas of the pan. And I'm pretty generous with the cup, so if you have a little extra chips, nobody will be upset about that. And then the toasted walnuts, generous 1/2 cup of chopped toasted nuts. That toasting, again, brings out the nutty flavor and gives them a little crunch. So we'll spread them out also evenly all over our pan. And then in the recipe, which you can get on our website, I did mention if you'd like to add coconut to the crust, either to the bottom half, the whole thing, or the top, you could pour this back in a bowl, add a little coconut flaked or shredded for you coconut lovers out there. I'm not going to do that today, but it is a nice addition, and if you choose to, you feel free to do that. And then we're going to take our 16 ounces, and flour, caramel mixture. And we're just going to spread that over the top of our crust and our nuts and our chips. And you can just kind of make ribbons go all the way around. Now you might just want to avoid going right to the edge of your pan because it might be a little harder to remove it if it sticks, but you definitely want to get it everywhere you can because you want every bite to have this nice gooey caramel flavor. So get it everywhere just initially, and then we can use our spatula again, our scraper, and just go over those areas that you may have missed with whatever's left in your bowl. And again, just cover all the nuts and chips with this good gooey caramel. Still saying it both ways. And then you're going to add your crumbs, your reserved 3 cups of crumbs from our crust as your topping. There's a little dot right there that needs some. If you have anybody around that likes to lick your beaters, they would be happy about that. So we'll take our crumbs and just evenly distribute them over the top of our filling. And again, nice even layer. You can kind of crumble some of it up also if you have bigger clumps when you're spreading it. Get to the corners again. We mentioned them earlier when we were baking our crust. And I still have this other cup over here. I wanted to talk about one more secret ingredient, and that's the love. This show is called Baking with Love, and I really do put it into everything I make. I've given people my recipes before, and I always write that, and it's in the one on the website, but they say, I made it just the way you said, and it didn't taste like yours. I said, well, you probably needed a little more love. So the love, it's pretty intangible, but it's taking time, it's paying attention, probably not talking on the phone or watching TV while you're baking, and just really, it's just really the secret. So we got the love in, we've got the crumbs on top, and now we're going to put it back in our oven. We've got a little oven mitt here that doesn't have caramel on it. For about 20 minutes. Again, your oven may be a little hotter or cooler than mine, so we're going to use the magic of TV again, and voila. We've got our Caramel Stella-Litas, but I know you want to try them. This is the hardest part. You need to wait for them to cool, and it could be a couple hours on the rack in the pan, and after that, you need to put them in the fridge to really make them set. So this recipe can be made a day ahead, and you can leave them in the fridge overnight. You just can't you can't rush it. You can't put it in the fridge right from the oven because the condensation will make it a little mushy. But let's use our imaginations, and we just let it cool completely on our rack, and then we've had them in the fridge overnight, and now we can remove them from our pan. So if all goes well, this parchment is the trick. You might need to take a butter knife and just run it along the sides of your pan to make sure that any caramel didn't stick. And then you might have to just jiggle it a little bit. So remember, it's nice and cool now and set. We got it. And we'll put it on our cutting board. Move this over. And you should be able to also kind of do the old tablecloth trick and pull out the parchment like so. And now we've got our long knife like we have in our last show. And we're going to cut them up. Now you could use bigger pieces if you have caramel lovers out there. You can do squares. I usually do squares. And you can just slice through a few rows. And again, if you want to make rectangles, you can make them into bars. And just make them into nice squares. because it's cold from the fridge, it might be a little tough to cut, but you can just work your way through all those nice layers. So you've got your chips, you've got your caramel, you've got your crust, and you've got your topping with that pinch of cinnamon in there. And like last show, I offered a few variations for my stuffed brownies. I have a great autumn variation for this. So instead of the chips, you might want to peel and core some Granny Smith apples, and you can put them chopped on top of the crust after it's cooked. You can still use your nuts if you choose, walnuts, pecans, toasted, and then your caramel. And if you have cinnamon chips, you may decide to sprinkle a little cinnamon chips in there if you've got them. And instead of the cinnamon, you can substitute apple pie spice, and you can make a really nice caramel apple Stella-Lita as a fall treat. Maybe you can take it to your Halloween parties. So that is caramel Stella-Litas, and I'm baking with love, and I hope you'll join me next time. Thanks so much.